The day I proposed to Ellie, I couldn't kneel. Not because I was afraid or unprepared, but because the accident 3 years earlier had taken that ability from me. Instead, I looked up at her from my wheelchair, ring in hand, as tears streamed down both our faces. She didn't hesitate, not for a second, before saying yes. That moment changed everything, proving that love doesn't see limitations, only possibilities. If you've ever wondered if true love exists in this broken world, stay with me until the end of this story. And if it touches your heart, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel for more stories that remind us of the power of human connection. My name is Daniel Mitchell, and before the accident, I was what most people would call normal. I worked as an architectural designer, spent weekends hiking with friends, and lived in a small apartment downtown. I was 28, ambitious, and completely oblivious to how quickly life could change. The morning of July 17th started like any other: coffee, quick breakfast, a jog around the neighborhood. I remember checking my watch as I crossed the street, thinking I might have time to grab a proper lunch before my afternoon meeting. I don't remember the impact. The doctors told me later that a distracted driver ran a red light at nearly 40 miles per hour. What I do remember is waking up in the hospital 3 days later, the sterile smell of disinfectant filling my nostrils, and the weight of news I wasn't prepared to hear: a spinal cord injury had left me paralyzed from the waist down. Permanent, they said. The word echoed in my head for days, weeks, months afterward. The first year was the hardest. I had to relearn everything: how to dress myself, how to navigate spaces not designed for wheelchairs, how to face the pitying looks from strangers. My apartment wasn't accessible, so I moved back in with my parents temporarily. My career seemed impossible to continue. Friends visited less and less as time went on. Depression became my constant companion, and I started to believe that this half-life was all I had to look forward to. I met Ellie at physical therapy. She wasn't my therapist, she was there supporting her younger brother who was recovering from a sports injury. I noticed her immediately, not just because she was beautiful with her curly brown hair and warm smile, but because she didn't look at me with pity. When our eyes met across the room, she simply smiled, the kind of genuine smile that reaches the eyes. "You're working really hard," she said one day as I struggled through an exercise. My brother gives up after 10 minutes and starts complaining. I managed a breathless laugh. "Trust me, I'm complaining on the inside. At least you keep it to yourself." That's admirable. It was such a small interaction, but it was the first time in months someone had spoken to me like a person, not a tragedy. We started talking more during our overlapping sessions. I learned she was an elementary school art teacher who loved hiking, ironically one of my former passions. She learned about my architectural background and my struggle to find purpose again. "Have you thought about adaptive design?" she asked one day. "My friend's mom uses a wheelchair, and she's always talking about how poorly designed most buildings are." The question planted a seed. I hadn't considered that my new perspective might actually be valuable in my field. That night, I researched accessible design for hours, discovering a whole specialization I'd barely considered before. Our friendship grew slowly. Coffee after therapy sessions turned into lunch dates, which eventually became dinner. I was hesitant, constantly waiting for her to realize that being with someone in a wheelchair meant complications, limitations, adjustments. But Ellie never seemed to notice the chair, she saw me. "I'm not going to pretend it's not there," she told me one night when I finally voiced my concerns. "But it's just a part of you, not all of you. And I like all the parts that make you who you are." 6 months into knowing each other, I invited her to my new apartment, one I'd found and modified myself using my rekindled interest in accessible design. I'd started freelancing again, focusing on universal design principles, and was slowly rebuilding my career. "This place is amazing," she said, running her hand along the specially designed kitchen counter. "You did all this yourself?" "Had some help with the heavy lifting," I admitted. "But the design is all mine." That night, as we sat on my accessible balcony watching the sunset, Ellie reached for my hand. "I think I'm falling in love with you," she said simply, without drama or hesitation. I stared at her, searching for any sign of uncertainty. "Are you sure? This isn't exactly what most people sign up for." She laughed, the sound carrying across the evening air. "I didn't sign up for anything, Daniel. I just met you and realized you're the person I want to be with. The chair is just logistics. Just logistics." She made it sound so simple, and somehow, with her, it was. That's not to say we didn't face challenges. There were places we couldn't go together, activities we had to modify, and ignorant comments from strangers we had to weather. But Ellie approached each obstacle with creativity and determination that matched my own. When I mentioned missing hiking, she researched adaptive trails and found a program that offered all-terrain wheelchairs. Our first hike together was exhausting, muddy, and absolutely perfect. When restaurants had steps and no ramps, she didn't hesitate to call ahead or suggest alternatives without making me feel like a burden. My parents adored her from the moment they met her. My mother pulled me aside after dinner and whispered, "She sees you, Daniel. Really sees you." It was the highest compliment she could give. Ellie's family took longer to warm up. Her father, in particular, had concerns about her taking on responsibility that he felt might eventually wear her down. It hurt to hear, but I understood his perspective. I'd had the same fears myself. "My dad means well," Ellie explained after an awkward family dinner. "He just doesn't understand yet that you're not a responsibility to me. You're a partner." That word, partner, meant everything. Because that's what we became to each other. When Ellie was passed over for a promotion at school, I was the one who encouraged her to fight for recognition of her work. When I struggled with accessibility issues at client sites, she helped me advocate for better solutions. We weren't defined by my disability, we were defined by how we showed up for each other. A year and a half into our relationship, we faced our first major crisis. I developed pressure sores that became infected, landing me in the hospital for weeks. The pain was excruciating, and the recovery meant complete bed rest. I couldn't work, couldn't maintain my independence, couldn't be the partner I wanted to be. "You should take a break," I told Ellie after a particularly rough day when the doctors had delivered discouraging news about my recovery timeline. "Go home, get some real sleep. You don't need to be here for all of this." She set down her book and looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Is that what you think this is? That I'm here out of obligation? I think you didn't sign up to be a nurse." "I'm not being a nurse, Daniel. I'm being a partner. And yes, sometimes that means being there through the hard stuff." She took my hand. "Would you leave if it were me in that bed?" The question stopped me cold. Of course I wouldn't. The thought hadn't even crossed my mind. "That's what I thought," she said softly. "So please stop trying to protect me from loving you." Those weeks in the hospital changed something fundamental in our relationship. The last of my walls came down. I stopped waiting for her to leave and started believing that maybe, just maybe, this extraordinary woman really did choose me, wheelchair and all. As I recovered, we started talking more seriously about the future. Ellie moved into my apartment, bringing her collection of houseplants and art supplies that soon took over every available surface. We discussed children, whether we wanted them, how we might adapt parenting with my disability. We researched options, talked to other parents with disabilities, and decided that yes, someday, we wanted to build a family together. 2 years after we met, I started designing our dream home, a house that would be fully accessible but wouldn't look medical or institutional. I incorporated all the knowledge I'd gained since my accident, creating spaces that would work for both of us. I didn't tell Ellie it was for us, I pretended it was a client project I was particularly excited about. "This is beautiful," she said, looking over the plans spread across our dining table. "Whoever lives here is going to be very lucky." I was thinking maybe we could be the lucky ones, I said, my heart pounding. If you wanted to build this with me. Her eyes widened as she realized what I was suggesting. Are you asking me to build a house with you? I'm asking for a lot more than that, I admitted. I'm asking for forever. That weekend, we drove to a piece of land outside the city that I'd been quietly looking at. It was perfect, relatively flat for accessibility, with beautiful views and enough space to grow. As we sat there, imagining our future home, I pulled out the ring I'd been carrying for weeks. I can't kneel, I said, looking up at her. But I can promise to love you with everything I am for as long as I live. Ellie Bennett, will you marry me? Through tears, she nodded, then found her voice. Yes. Absolutely yes. Our wedding was planned with the same attention to accessibility and inclusion that had become central to our relationship. We found a venue with no steps, made sure the dance floor was wheelchair-friendly, and created a celebration that reflected both of us. I worked with a physical therapist for months on a surprise, a special wheelchair and support system that would allow me to dance with Ellie while supported in a standing position for our first dance. When the moment came, and I rose from my chair with assistance to hold her in my arms for our dance, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. For 3 minutes, we swayed together, my legs supported by braces, her arms around my neck, our foreheads touching as we moved to the music. Thank you for seeing me, I whispered. Thank you for letting me, she replied. That was 5 years ago. Today, we live in the house we designed together. I run a successful architectural firm specializing in universal design, and Ellie continues to teach art while also illustrating children's books in her spare time. Last year, we welcomed our daughter, Lily, through adoption, a spirited 2-year-old who already knows how to climb onto my lap in the wheelchair and thinks having a dad with wheels instead of feet is the coolest thing ever. Life isn't perfect. I still have health complications, still face accessibility barriers, still encounter people who see the chair before they see me. But I also have a partner who has never once made me feel like a burden, a career that gives me purpose, and a family that brings me joy every single day. The accident took many things from me, but it also gave me perspective. It showed me that strength comes in many forms, physical, yes, but also emotional, intellectual, spiritual. Ellie's strength wasn't in helping me navigate the physical world, though she did that too. Her strength was in her unwavering belief that I was whole exactly as I was, in her refusal to let either of us be defined by limitations rather than possibilities. If there's one thing I've learned through all of this, it's that love doesn't require perfection. It doesn't demand that we fit some predetermined mold of what relationships should look like. Real love adapts. It finds a way. It sees beyond the surface to the person underneath. My wheelchair is part of my story, but it's not the whole story. The whole story is about two people who chose each other, day after day, through challenges and triumphs. It's about finding strength in vulnerability and building a life that honors both our needs. It's about recognizing that sometimes, the most unexpected paths lead to the most beautiful destinations. So if you're facing your own challenges, if you're wondering whether love is possible in the midst of difficulty, if you're afraid that your differences make you somehow unworthy, I hope our story gives you hope. Because the truth is, we're all broken in some way. We all have our wheelchairs, visible or invisible. And we all deserve someone who sees beyond them to the person we truly are. Ellie became my strength not by carrying me, but by walking beside me, by believing in me when I couldn't believe in myself, by loving me completely, wheelchair and all. And in doing so, she helped me find a strength in myself I never knew existed. If you found something meaningful in our story, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel. Your support helps us share more stories of hope, resilience, and love that transcends all barriers. Remember, the greatest limitations we face are often the ones we place on ourselves. Love sees beyond them all.